Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Tinnitist TV. Today, I am talking to my buddy Eamon McGrath. You know, he's a long way from James Brown, but he is the hardest working man in Canadian indie music. McGrath releases albums by the handful. He tours almost constantly. He's even written a couple of books, and he does much of this single-handedly from his home base in Windsor. That's where I caught up to him recently to talk about his latest release, A Dizzying Lust, a gorgeous acoustic album that he wrote, naturally, while touring Japan again last year. But like any dedicated multitasker, McGrath wasn't content to just talk. He also set up a couple of cameras and mics and performed a trio of songs from the album to boot. So sit back and enjoy, and keep your eyes peeled for his next album, which will probably be out by the time our interview ends. All right, Eamon McGrath, it is a pleasure to talk to you again.
It's a pleasure to be back. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. We are here to talk about your new album, A Dizzying Lust. You are just the most prolific guy that I think I've ever dealt with. This is your 8th album of the year, which is just astounding to me. And I understand you wrote this entire album basically while you were on tour in Japan. Have I got that right?
Yeah, pretty much. The whole thing was essentially written on the Shinkansen, which is the bullet train. So in Japan, there's a notable shortage of motor vehicles. I've toured there twice, and both times I think I've maybe been in a car. I mean, for a total of 15 minutes. It's like the entire society is revolves around the train system, which is incredibly efficient. So yeah, you spend just like hours of your life on the bullet train, and so yeah, I mean it was kind of like I used to tour Europe that way when I was younger, when in my early 20s, and I wrote a book about doing that, and so it was kind of funny that it was like reliving these past memories of seeing an entire country from the the Viewmaster window of a train. And
But I mean, are you just sitting in like a coach car with like people all around you and your guitar out playing, or what?
Yeah, pretty much. That's exactly what it is. Yeah, and so I mean the train is like it's a bar, it's an office, it's a studio, it's a van. Like it kind of becomes this really weird symbol. It's your home. It's kind of the one sort of like consistent unifying familiarity, especially in Japan, where it's like you're as alien as you could possibly be. Like the experience is like the closest thing you could get to going to another planet while staying on Earth. So you do really go like 8 to 10 hours a day without saying the English, like saying a word in the English language. So the writing, the act of writing ends up becoming this really therapeutic thing, and sort of becomes this way of trying to make sense of the really disorienting feeling of not only jet lag, but of being like that much of an outsider. And especially as someone that like tours as much as I do and has toured as much as I do, that feeling hasn't been in my life for going on 10 or 15 years now. I mean, like the world's a pretty familiar place to me, and I was talking to my partner last night about the fact that it's really rare for me to walk into a music venue or a bar like anywhere in the world and not be known. And I don't mean that in an egotistical way. It's just like I'm either like going to a show, working at a show, playing a show, or I have just played a show. So it's like it's the music venues all over the world are kind of my stomping grounds or whatever. But in Japan, it's not like that. Like you really are a very distant traveler. So there's a lot of inspiration in the feeling of loneliness that you get when you go and play music there alone. And yeah, writing this record was a really good way of dealing with that in some ways. And
well, I mean, I can hear it in the songs, because to me, this is listening to the album. It's very It is very lonely. It's a lot of these songs are nostalgic, the haunting. It's very nocturnal. This is, to me, it kind of feels like a real Dark Night of the Soul album. It all sounds like it was written by a guy sitting alone somewhere at 4 a.m., you know?
I mean, that's exactly what it was. Yeah. I mean, it would be like, trying to overcome like an absolutely debilitating chronic bout of jet lag and being wide awake at, like you said, 4 a.m. in Osaka, and making sense of it all by chronicling the experience in almost real time.
So I
And
mean,
yeah,
but when you're sitting on the train and you pull out your guitar and your, I don't know, your recorder or your notebook or whatever, however you're physically doing this, what happens? Do people, just go about their business, or do they stop and they watch
yeah,
you?
most of the time you get asked to stop, and then you finish the lyrics or something, and pick up where you left off when you get to the hotel or the venue or whatever. But at least you have a minute to like, contemplate the structure of it. So you do a lot of it sort of abstractly, and then yeah, like that's how most of the record was written. And then I'd get to the hotel room and I'd have like a voice memo or something on your iPhone.
Okay, I got you.
It. Uh, and then yeah, over the course of last winter in Windsor, I recorded it in this house, and just with myself, pretty much with exactly the gear you're looking at now. And so the whole record was pretty urgent and done really quickly. And so, because like you said, like all those feelings of loneliness and everything, like to me, they kind of felt like they were almost instruments on the record. So I wanted to do it as soon as I could, as close to the sort of inception of those songs as possible.
Sure.
And that was the whole idea. So
let's talk a little bit about some of the lyrical things you come back to on this, because when I was listening to it, there's a lot of transportation lyrics. I mean, and I can see that's kind of obvious because of the circumstances in its creation. But every song almost seems to have a train or a plane or occasionally a boat. There's a lot of walking around by yourself. And the other thing that I noticed is there's a lot of precipitation in this album for some reason. There's a lot of rain, there's a lot of snow, there's a lot of thunderstorms, which to me, I mean, I can sort of see them both as being kind of these metaphors for A, the journey of life, and B, the hardships of life, the storms and the stuff that falls into us from outside in our world. Is there more to it than that, or was it just as simple as it was raining while you were on the train, and so that's what you wrote about?
No, I mean, Japan is a very geographically diverse place. Like it's a lot like it's like a smaller sort of more contained Canada or North America or something, where it's like you really do have like the snowy snow-capped mountains of Hokkaido, and then as far south as like looking north on Korea in Kochi City, which is essentially like a tropical, like it's very humid South Pacific with beaches, all that shit. And you get that within like 20 hours of each other. And then yeah, as a metaphor, it's kind of the perfect way of articulating the disparity of the wide range of emotions that you can feel when you're on tour, and especially when you're on tour over there, when you're just like that, like quite literally chronically exhausted, and within the span of 10 or 20 minutes, like you can go from like a total just facepalm moment to having the greatest show of your life. And in Japan, the standard and the caliber on a technical level for every venue is unmatched. And so it's more or less impossible to have a bad show there. And it's interesting, like, again, the paradox, like you said, the weather phenomenon, how you're on the train and it's like you're in like the punishing rain in Tokyo, and then 4 hours later you're looking at snow-capped mountains in Sapporo. And like, yeah, that paradoxical sort of feeling of being at your lowest and then your highest 20 minutes later is pretty pretty normal over there. And
Do-
so,
do
like
you-
you said, exactly, that's like having that sort of wide range of emotions and that complexity and all that complicated psychological shit was definitely part of the record.
do you normally write on tour?
I mean, I try to. It's a little harder when you're doing all your own driving, obviously, and everything like
Sure.
that. And I know that sounds a bit boring, but I mean, again, when I was younger and touring Europe on the Deutsche Bahn, you know, I mean, I wrote a book about it on the Deutsche Bahn. You have all the time in the world when you're not driving, when you have a table and, you know, a coffee in front of you. So yeah, I mean, I do tons of writing if I'm touring that way, and it's one of the many luxuries of not having to be responsible for getting yourself from point A to point B. Is that you can take these creative liberties that you otherwise wouldn't when you're, you know, tour managing yourself 24/7.
Fair enough. But I mean, this seems like it was a particularly fruitful chunk of time that you had. Obviously, did you come up with? Are these all the songs? It's 8 songs. Were there more that you wrote, or were these just
Yeah, there's a couple
just everything?
scrappers.
Sorry.
But for the most part, yeah, this was like maybe there was 12 in total, and I threw 5 to the wolves or whatever.
How many songs have you written?
I have quite a few. I mean, like I used to have a rule where, you know, I would record every song I wrote, and I would release every 10 songs that I recorded. And, you know, the first record, my first like official record on White Whale, this is going on like, I don't even know now, like 15 years ago or whatever. That was like a compilation of all those records. So there was 23 full-length records that I sent to the label, and from that they picked their top 13. And I mean, so that was like, by the time I was 20, I had over 23 albums worth of stuff. And I mean, a lot of it sucked, but you know, I mean, I wasn't at the point in my life where I cared about that. I was kind of just throwing fucking paint at the wall or whatever. But yeah, I mean, a lot of songs, because you know, if you average 10 songs, 8 songs a record, it's 230 songs. And then since then I've put out about 13 records. And then there's all the stuff that they never release. But that's, to me, it's kind of just like I don't really see it as like I don't know, a talking point, because it's like your job is to write songs, you know, like you never keep track when you go to the office or whatever, you're not keeping track of how many days a year you're working. You're just kind of doing it. And you make a living playing music, writing songs, and it's kind of just part of that. It's just like the body of work is what it is, and it speaks for itself. And that's the important thing, is that you're working, you know. And that's how.
Yeah, but that's a different way than a lot of artists look at it, because a lot of artists look at it as this sort of, you know, sacred thing, and to some degree, you know, it is. Inspiration is kind of a mystery, and you don't want to look too far into it to try and pin down the butterfly and all that. And I get that. But, you know, there are artists who write maybe 1 song a year, you know, or don't write at all unless they specifically have an album to make. And, you know, you treat it as more a job, you know?
Treat it as a job. And I also, like, I try to not be too refined in my approach to it. Like, if something's not working, I'd rather just abandon it and move on. And you know, and sometimes you don't really figure out if it's working or not until you hear the whole thing back. And by that time, the song's written. But like, I'm totally antagonistic to that, like, Leonard Cohen approach of like beating something to death and spending, you know, 2.5 years on one line. That just don't work that way. And some people do, which is great. I mean, that's their method. But I think that, yeah, the way that I write and record and put out records, and also the way that the music industry now is, just like the structure of it, you're sort of required to have a really prolific output if you want to keep yourself on the road all the time. And again, like, that just all kind of ties into just having a work ethic and wanting to pay your bills, you know. And I mean, I don't see anything wrong with that. I mean, for me, it's really nice to have that as the inspiration, because it's like, there's nothing like being forced to be creative doesn't make you any less creative, so I sort of do take a bit more of like a working man's approach to it, which is just what I'm comfortable with doing. I mean, it's sacred to me, like my work is sacred, but it's like I do also like the idea of like, punching in and having this kind of labor intensive attitude to music. Like that's what makes it special to me. That's what makes it sacred to me.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. Well, listen, you're going to play some stuff today, which is great. So I think the first one we're going to do is "Hold Me, Never Let Me Go," which is,
Yes.
I believe, it was the second single from the thing. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what it's about?
Yeah, I mean, we touched on it. It was written on the train. I was playing a weekend of shows around Sapporo, and it was just this really captivating, beautiful moment where like you feel just really far from home, like the furthest from home you could possibly go. Like if you can imagine that. It was just about being present in that state of mind.
All right, well, that seems like a good
there it is.
introduction. Let's hear it.
I boarded a train to go where few Westerners ever go. Headed north towards the wild, restless islands of Hokkaido. Looking east on the Pacific from the Oshima Peninsula. Trying hard to not let some emotions get the best of ya. Hold me in your arms. Save me from eternal falling snow. Keep me safe from harm. Never, 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 never let me go. Never let me go. Vast and unexplainable nature of life begins to take hold. Tokyo and Honshu get so hot, Hokkaido is so cold. And the world can be rough and unforgiving and desperate, dying place. And the wonder and the beauty of it all offers such quick escape. Hold me in your arms. Save me from eternal falling snow. Keep me safe from harm. Never, 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 never let me go. Never let me go. The feeling of discovery and the captivating sense of love and joy. Explore each other's bodies, what it means to be a girl and a boy. Mountains and oceans and highways and railroads and trees. Skyscrapers and Everglades, crumbling cities, cold prairies and trees. Heads kept on turning, and I'm the only cowboy on the train. And I kept looking out the window, trying to see Hokkaido in the rain. And a fog crept over mountain tops as the life that laid behind me disappeared. And the Pacific to the east of me was breathing just as salty as my tears. Hold me in your arms, save me from eternal falling snow, keep me safe from harm. Never, 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 never let me go. Never let me go. Never let me go. Never let me go. Never let me go.
Well, that is gorgeous stuff.
All
That
right.
is gorgeous stuff, sir.
Thank you, sir.
I like the way, I mean, I love the way you use on the album and in this setting too, the reverb on the vocals, because it really kind of gets across that isolation and detachment and you know, sort of haunted loneliness of a lot of the lyrics.
Yeah, and like I've over the course of the years of touring, and I've really come to think about that as an instrument, right? Like the idea of space being a sound, and there's nothing lonelier than feeling like, you know, you're standing up straight with nothing around you. I mean, like that's growing up in the prairies, that was kind of the touchstone thing we always used to talk about, was that like punk rock bands from Edmonton, like, you know, your amp was just that much louder when there was nothing else around it.
Yeah.
And we always used to talk about that as being this kind of symbolic thing of you know, just being from the prairies and having that vastness around you. And I grew up with that, and that's always been my mission, is to sort of try and capture the feeling of hearing a record, you know, for the first time on the QE2. That's how I fell in love with Neil Young, you know, was hearing Unknown Legend in that setting. That had a really profound impact on my life. And also, like, using this kind of 2 microphone thing, you know, we were talking about earlier, with that sort of just like practicality of like a working man's aesthetic or whatever, like almost like, you know, being a musician is a trade. Like I can take that setup with a reverb pedal or not. I can take it anywhere in the world where, you know, any language can be spoken, and I can express exactly what I want from my show to a sound person. And that goes a long way, you know, like it's not only for consistency, you know, and always delivering like a really like top quality product, but also being able to capture that feeling of loneliness in any setting at all, whether it's a house show or a club or a 6,000 person music festival. You know, you can always get that point across and always convey that feeling of loneliness. That's a crucial part of my show, for sure.
I also love these songs are so direct and simple. Like they almost have they're almost pared down to the bone. You know, it's not like you've got, you know, 3 or 4 different parts in here and pre-choruses and bridges and all. You know, it's like it's kind of a real direct line, right straight, just cutting through the song. So it's beautiful. There's not an ounce of fat on any of these tracks. You know,
Yeah, that's 100% intentional. And
yeah.
Again, like that, just like that workers kind of approach. You know, not to whine and moan about what's happened in the last couple of years to the, you know, to our industry or whatever, but taking the approach that you just described, like stripping all of the fat, you know, and getting a show right down to the point where it's nothing more a human being and a guitar, or a human being and a piano, or even something even simpler than that, if possible, is the best way of maintaining your your survival as an artist now. And for me, that starts with the songs, right? Like, paring down absolutely everything in your show, in your aesthetic, and in your approach to creation of what you do. That for me, that was like, that started with the record I was making. And we encountered a lot of issues with Bells of Hope, which was really like a valiant effort on the part of everybody involved in that record, from management to label to publicity to people playing in the band to people booking shows. Everybody worked their asses off. And still, it was like we encountered a lot of really challenging roadblocks that probably would not have existed had I made a record acoustically. And not to say that I regret it at all. I'm just saying that it's like, it was tough to adapt to the changes that happened really, really quickly during that record cycle, because we live in a world that just is completely incomparable to, on a day-to-day basis. It's mental. I mean, that record came out on the day that the war in Ukraine started, and all like a year of shows, 10 months of shows were booked, and no one could have predicted the impact that event would have had on anything, let alone, my piddly little record cycle. But I mean, when it's just you on a train with a guitar and the emotions you're trying to convey through songwriting, that can persevere through any challenge. So part of adapting to the modern era is changing the way that changing the starting point, changing the way that you begin the story. And so that everything you just described was a really conscious thing in the creation of this record.
Yeah, and it might be coincidental in this case, but when I was listening to this, it kind of almost fit really well, given that a lot of these songs are set in Japan, were created in Japan. It almost has sort of an Asian economy to it, because that is a lot of their culture. Is everything is kind of pared down and efficient and economical, and it I don't know. Again, it just kind of fits in with the aesthetic of the songs, and I'm guessing that might have been coincidental, but it works. I mean, it's
a really, really contrarian way of thinking about even the arranging of a city, like a place like Tokyo versus a city like even Toronto or Winnipeg, or where like Canadian cities have an incomparable amount of urban sprawl. And not that Tokyo doesn't, but within the urban environment, every single inch of space is used. And it's like, there's not a single thing happens in Tokyo that's not like 100% intentional. And if there's a huge public park, that park is for peace and tranquility. And that's the assigned role that space assumes. And there's no arguing with that, And I really appreciate that about it. I mean, like you said, it's economic, it's efficient, and I mean, it's the same when you have nothing to rely on in a song other than an acoustic guitar and voice. Every single thing that happens instrumentally has to be there. So maybe subconsciously there was this kind of inspiration that was taken from the way those cultures organized. I mean, it's fascinating, and it's amazing to watch it as an outsider, because I mean, like every single thing that happens in Japan is almost the polar opposite of the way we do it here. So like, as a metaphor, it's a lot of bars in Tokyo, you get chastised if you go outside to smoke. Like they make you smoke inside because they don't want to bother with the neighbors or whatever. I mean, that's a parallel universe to how we smoke here. I mean, that's like one tiny thing, but it's a perfect example. And then that pattern sort of continues. So
wild. So let's listen to another song. Next one that you're going to do for us is "Sundown in Osaka," which is at least on the surface of the lyrics, the story of somebody, maybe you, maybe somebody else, walking the streets at night. It sounds like.
Yeah, it's just about a really persistent case of jet lag and just that hallucinatory feeling of of exhaustion and sort of just being out of place and away from home. I mean, everybody feels it on a certain level. At some point in their lives, but I mean, I haven't to the degree that I did in Japan the last time I was there. I mean, like, I barely notice when I go to Europe anymore. It's become like, I mean, I used to joke with friends of mine, but in the early 2010s when I was touring Europe like a lot, and it was true that I would go to London, England more than I would cross Yonge Street, and so the jet lag and going to that part of the world doesn't really happen to me anymore. I'm pretty used to it, but there's no way around it when you go to, like, the polar opposite side of the globe. It's like persistent, and it takes a really long time to adjust. So yeah, you have this really sort of disorienting feeling, and for me, the peak of the tour was this one night in Osaka. So that's what this song's about.
All right.
Okay, here we go.
Walk the cold, deserted streets at 4 a.m. in a city which I can't recall the name. Down the corridors and alleyways, and palaces where sleeplessness awaits. Inside my head, the pounding drums, an angel choir saying nothing but your name. Amidst the broken cigarette machines and libraries full of long forgotten dreams, I am a distant ghost, a windless sail out on the coast, a fleck of sand washed up on a beach. Wandering the empty halls of sleep, wandering the empty halls of sleep. I spent my birthday on a Delta plane, flying over tiny ships in Tokyo Bay. Ueno was an old man with a troubled heart, beats so subtle, soft and quietly. And in the pillow creases on his leather face, there appeared in front of me a secret place. And like a distant fading memory, I took upon myself to search for peace. I am a distant ghost, a windless sail out on the coast, a fleck of sand washed up on a beach. Wandering the empty halls of sleep, wandering the empty halls of sleep. Kodak film is burning up the night with the anger of 1,000 dying stars. The dust and echoes all corrode and rust, and the screams of lonely clubs and empty bars. The shuttered windows and the locking doors punctuate the frozen hum of starting cars. And just about as quick as I arrived, I walk off into the sunrise from the dark.
again, beautiful stuff. I love the harmonica in that song and some of the other songs. It's again, it all just fits in with the haunting, the loneliness. I keep coming back to those words, but you've really created like a really consistent little world here in these 8 songs. There's no outliers. There's nothing, it just takes you into this little microcosm of life and loneliness and sadness, and just holds you there for the, 36 minutes that this album exists. It's a beautiful little thing you've done here.
Thanks. That was like exactly the goal.
Well, mission accomplished, man.
Well, thanks. I mean, we keep coming back to that loneliness and stuff. I mean, I was touring there alone, right? So like, in some ways, it's just kind of like a way to bring the listener into being like my touring companion on the train or something. Like, as weird as that sounds, it's
Exactly,
like
yeah.
a way to have someone kind of sitting beside me, or like sitting beside the narrator or whoever it is, through this journey through a foreign land. I mean, that's really what it was. I mean, it was like there was 2 legs to the tour. So there was like the northern leg where I flew into Tokyo, and then I kind of made my way up to Hokkaido, and then there was 2 days off for travel where I went from Hokkaido all the way down to Kochi City, which is like on the furthest south, the main islands you could kind of go. Like, that would be the equivalent of like going from St. John's, Newfoundland to Victoria,
Right.
Almost overnight. Like, if you could put it in Canadian terms, it's like we're talking like very, very far. And like, people there couldn't believe that I did it. Like, they were like, it would be unthinkable to a Japanese person to make that journey in that time. And which also, created that sort of feeling of loneliness, in the sense that like no one could ever relate to that. Like, the locals couldn't relate to it. So like, it added to that alien sort of feeling, and that like outsider feeling even more. I mean, it was trippy. The whole thing was trippy. And yeah, so this was the perfect vehicle, so to speak, to capture that sort of a feeling. And then the harmonica
really
you're talking about, for me personally, I like associate that sound with like a train whistle, or this. Like, to me, that's like what it's really evocative of. Even though trains in Japan are like silent, like they're really clean and pristine, and it's like you barely even, I mean, they're not how we would think of a train. Like, there's no, the North American archetype of like the Wild West, like a railroad type. Like, it's not like that at all. It's like really high tech and super streamlined. And I mean, it's fascinating that even that is like a polar opposite that they have. Is like the concept of what a train means to society is something totally different. Like, there's no, it's not like billowing out into the vast frontier. But paradoxically, that's kind of what I was doing. So for me, like, yeah, the harmonica became this kind of symbol of that feeling, for sure.
Was there a lot of culture shock for you over there? I mean, do you ever get comfortable, or is it all just sort of a constant?
Well, it's weird because you have to go, at least from my experiences going over there. I've been over there a few times, and you have to go for like 3.5 weeks to make it really, really worth it. And I know like not a lot of bands do. I mean, some people go there and play 4 shows, or they play Tokyo, Osaka, and they leave. But like, they're there for a long time. Like, they're there for a week or whatever, but they only do a couple shows or something. But like, an artist on my level, where you got to be playing every day to make any money or whatever, it's like, yeah, like I have to go to Japan for quite a while. So I have to go there for like a month or something to make the trip really worth it. And by the time you feel like you've kind of adjusted and gotten the rhythm of all of it and made sense of the place and made sense of yourself within it, I mean, that more importantly, you got to turn around and go home. So even that's weird, because it's like you finally adjust and you're finally over the jet lag. And then the minute that your body's adjusted and your brain's kind of getting used to even like recognizing the characters or knowing what, the difference between kanji or katakana is or something like that or whatever, you're on a plane and you're flying back home to North America, and then you have to revisit all those feelings of disorientation and alienation again, because no one here understands this confusion that you had for the last 3 weeks of your life. So on like both sides of the mirror, there's this really crazy experience that happens to you. And I mean, all of that went into this record for sure.
That makes sense. Yeah. It also, to me, it speaks to your experience and your intent as a songwriter. You've written how many ever hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of songs. And it's very impressive to me, again, that you can create willfully this thing that all hangs together. You know what I mean? Which is something that as a young songwriter, you might not have been able to do, to start off from this place and live in this sort of, area and this zone of nocturnal isolation and haunting loneliness and all that, that you can start writing these songs and write 8 or 9 or 10 or 12 songs and all have them be in the same place and fit together as a whole, as an album, the way this does. That is an admirable thing to be able to do. Do you feel yourself now as an older songwriter, a guy who's been doing this for decades now, having more command and being able to put yourself in that place and explore all the various facets of it, as opposed to when you were younger and you were just kind of trying to keep up with all the ideas that popped into your head and get them down as fast as you could?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very multi-layered question, because for me, it's like there's a certain ceiling you hit creatively in terms of like the instrumentation of Western music. Like there's only so many chords, and it's a drawback, in my opinion, of Western music. So I would say that the thing that makes a song uniquely a songwriter's and that makes it their own and only their own is the personal experience they have on which the song is based, because that's the only time in human history that experience has ever happened. Because you're the only human in human history that's ever existed. So if something happens to you, then it would follow that that's the only time that that's ever happened in the history of you know what I mean? So yeah, as you get older and you continue being creative, you pay more attention to those occurrences, because you realize that that's the only thing about your songs that actually makes them new and unique. There's quite literally millions of songs that use the D and G as the chords, and it's impossible to make a new idea from those two chords. But what you can do is write about something that you and no one else in the history of the world has ever experienced. And so yeah, I think that it follows that as you progress through your creative whatever journey, as cheesy as you want to be about it, you get more cannon fodder because you have more experiences. And I've written hundreds of songs that use the same 3 chords, but the lyrics are what make them what they are. And I wouldn't have been able to write those lyrics if I never had an experience to base them on. So the more crazy shit you get up to, the more songs you'll be able to write. And for me, that's sort of, again, like that practical, like working, like there's the reality of just playing music as a day job. It's like it kind of has this snowball effect of being this self-fulfilling prophecy of like the more you tour, the more crazy shit will happen to you, the more crazy shit you'll write about, the more songs you'll have, and the more touring you'll do. And then just like eventually you're sitting on, a really huge body of work.
Yeah. And you couple that with the experience of having done this hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times and kind of knowing the tricks of the trade, as it were. I mean, or knowing how to, get from A to point B in the most, whichever way you want to do it, in the fastest way or in the most florid way, or in the, you know what I mean? You kind of have all these tools at your disposal,
Like the chords you use are the same, in the same way that a carpenter knows how to use a drill or something. I don't know, table saw.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You're limited by these parameters, and within those parameters, you have the lyrical freedom to convey an experience that has only ever happened to you and you alone.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you're right. As you get more experienced, and have more to write about lyrically, you get better at using the tools that you're given through the really rigid parameters of Western music, in the same way that a saw only moves in two directions. It's the same
exactly.
thing. So yeah, you're right. I mean, there's a really streamlined way of writing songs now for me that doesn't take too long. But again, what we were talking about earlier, that also goes in line with my approach of abandoning something if it's not working. I try to not dwell on bullshit, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's wrap this up with the last song you're going to do, which is Fireworks. Talking about using a tool. I mean, this is to me the title and the fireworks are a metaphor for love and the warmth and the light of love. But again, is that where you were going with this, or was it just as simple as
sure.
some fireworks?
It's definitely like, fireworks that happen between two people, and it's obviously an overused metaphor, but it's an overused metaphor because it's a good one. I mean, and then also like the feeling of hope, like for me on New Year's Eve, for example, one of the most tender aspects of New Year's Eve is that seeing those fireworks and knowing that there's so much promise coming in the time that lays ahead or whatever. So there's also that aspect of it too, like the idea that it's not just about, it's an explosion of love between two people, but it's also about like the good feelings that are coming down the two pike or whatever, so to speak, or something.
Perfect. Well,
this is
start to it.
fireworks.
Yeah.
Crumbling marble archways, what are they leading to? Opening all those doorways to get right back to you. Out on the open ocean, a capsizing boat, with most of the English language trapped inside my throat. Please don't be scared, fireworks are waiting for us there. Don't be afraid, I'll melt away the frozen rain that falls through the air. Vanished without a warning, now what are we to do? Where once were clouds all forming is now only morning dew. I left and changed my number, broke the locks on the door, took all the things that I needed, left the rest scattered on the floor. Please don't be scared, fireworks are waiting for us there. Don't be afraid, I'll melt away the frozen rain that falls through the air. Fireworks explode over the dark and empty skies. Can see the reflection in your tangerine green eyes. Well, let's all get lost, 'cause then we'll all have something to find. Finally escape from the trauma bonds that bind. Don't even know the meanings, the words that I never say, and it all becomes so fleeting, doesn't matter anyway. We're both like two tears cried from the eyes of rage, washed away by the melted frozen rain falling on the page. Fireworks are waiting for us there. Fireworks are waiting for us there. Fireworks are waiting for us there. Fireworks are waiting for us there.
Beautiful. So are you playing? Are you going to be playing all of the album live for the next foreseeable future, or what's the plan with this?
Yeah, a good chunk of it. There's a couple songs that I might sort of reserve for certain shows, but I mean, definitely, yeah, the stuff that's been released already for sure. That's been a pretty crucial part of the live show for the last couple months. So
You know, I
yeah,
find it
they're all
interesting for somebody who's as prolific as you, though, because I'm guessing that since you wrote these songs, you've probably written, I don't know how many more. So, you know, and an artist tends to be most in love with either the last song they just wrote or the one that they're about to write. So to go back and do these songs, that beautiful as they are, and it's your new album and all that, but they're still, you know, months and months old at this point. Is that a weird sort of dichotomy to be in as a performer?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I mean, in a lot of ways, you're still like when something's really new, you're still sort of discovering it. And I mean, it's funny. Like there's songs like Vancouver Bound, this song from Tantramar that I usually open most shows with. I was listening back to this demo of it from like whatever that was 7 years ago or something now, and the chorus is completely different. Like I'm singing for all intents and purposes like the fucking wrong melody, like in comparison to what was written originally. And that's just because, you know, over the years of playing it, like, you know, quite literally 1,000+ times, you just forget, and it starts to be natural to you in a whole other way, you know, and all these different things happen in your life, and the song gets sort of reapplied to those, and it changes meaning for you based on what's happened to you and who you've met and, you know, forgotten about or whatever, or who's forgotten about you, and vice versa, whatever. So I mean, these songs will probably sound totally different in 2 or 3 years, and you know, that's because like you put out a record and you hear it and you listen to it to death until it's mastered and it's finished, and then you probably aren't ever going to really put it on again. You know, you're learning the songs to play them live for people, and that's what they become for you. Is they take on their role in that setting, you know. Or like Sparkle and Bleed is a song from Bells of Hope, and the way I play that bridge now is like completely different than what it was on the record. But to be honest with you, I can't even remember how the bridge on the record goes. And I you know, so to be honest with you, it's like for all intents and purposes, again, like totally fucking wrong.
But there's no right and wrong. It's your song, but we've talked about this before, I think, too, about, you know, the way you write and the way you record is a lot about, you know, capturing the music as it is being born almost, and, you know, in the moment. And to that degree, I mean, it only makes sense that the songs, they're living things. So they live and they grow and they change and they evolve as you do. Do you think that some of these songs are going to be ones that you are coming back to in the months and years ahead, that will sort of, you know, because you've got so many songs, putting together a set list, you've got so much you can draw from, that I imagine there are songs that you haven't played since you wrote them, or since they were on whatever album they were on. So, I mean, you know, do you think
that I
will last longer?
To be honest with you, like I have no idea how it goes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah. I mean, I wouldn't tour as much as I do, you know, if nothing really mattered to me more than the act of playing live. Right. So for me, it's just all about how that piece of music works in the moment, in the room that it's being played in, for the people that are there to hear it. You know, I mean, recording is an incredible experience too, but it's just a different art form. It's a completely different thing. It's probably closer to painting than it is to playing music, especially nowadays with the way recording technology is. I mean, you never do more than 2 or 3 takes on anything, you know, like it's like so much of it's left to the software that it's more of like a visual experience. You're like you're sort of painting an approximation or a metaphor for someone is how the song's going anyway. And then, you know, like the live experience is the one where it actually takes on the life form that you record it for, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a constantly evolving thing. And I mean, in 2 or 3 years, I'll still be playing these songs, but they'll probably sound totally different.
Well, at least you'll still be playing them, and that's great because these are some of the most beautiful songs that you've written in in weeks for you.
Oh, thanks.
Speaking of which, you're going back to Europe for the spring again, right?
Yeah, so there's 2 European tours coming up. The one we just announced is going to be sort of later in the summer in June, and that's around a festival called Obernusa Fest that's in Zurich, and I've been trying to play it again for the last 3 or 4 years because of whatever, everything that happened. That's been impossible. So it was really, really important to me to get back there and do it this year, because the people that organize it are very close friends of mine. I've worked with them very closely over the years. The festival Obernusa occupies this really positive, nostalgic place in my heart, because the last time I played it, I opened for Propaganda, who are heroes of mine. And you being in Winnipeg, I'm sure you
Yes
relate. So yeah, it's a really important festival for me. It really mattered to me that I play it for this record. So I worked some shows around it for June, and then I'm about to leave next week for a European tour that more or less doesn't end till end of May.
And then I'll presume you'll come back with 3 more albums worth of material.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's hard to say. Obviously, inspiring things happen all the time on the road, but Europe at this point is kind of my backyard. I mean, I know, I've been touring there for years. It's a lot of those places are homes away from home for sure. So.
Well, I'd like to put in a request for a big, loud-ass rock and roll electric guitar album at some point, if I might, sir.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully that'll happen at some point in the future. I think that everybody's trying to wait for the world to sort of equalize. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can't wait to play electric guitar with a full band again. It's just got to be possible. Right now, it's a really huge hill to climb. But like if and when I can do it, I absolutely will. It's like one of the best feelings in the world. But I had to really adjust what I did and how I did it.
Yeah, and from this album, I think Teenager in particular would be great. I can just hear it kind of as a big anthemic, explosive, rock song.
Well, it's funny you say that, because there is a version of that song that will come out within the next 4 or 5 months that is exactly that. So
perfect.
Keep watch for that.
All right. Sure. Well, listen, man, thanks as always for talking to me today. Thanks especially for playing these songs. That was a real treat. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm looking forward to catching up again. Thanks for all the support and for everything you do for independent Canadian music. Sure. Well, it is a pleasure. It is, and it is easy to do when there's so much music you make, and it's such good music. So, you make it easy for a guy like me. Right on. Well, thanks, Daryl. All right.